Okay, it's 11 o'clock, so I'm going to begin. I will be looking back and forth between my notes, so forgive me if I'm not always looking at you directly. Uh, Welcome to our final live stream of So You Think You Can Write a Screenplay. Each time I reiterate the fact that this is not a screenwriting course. It is basically, the purpose of it is to help you decide if you do want to try to tackle screenwriting, and I hope you will. Many people think they can do it, especially when they see a bad movie and they think, wow, I could do better than that. And it's like art. You go to a museum and you see, for example, a Rothko, which is very basic, squares within squares. And you think, wow, that looks easy. However, what people are missing and what it's not so easy is the conceit behind it and the craft behind it, the thinking behind it, the years of knowledge behind it. And it's similar to screenwriting because it's just not as easy as people seem to think it may be. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you don't think it's easy, but you're going to find out if you try doing it that it's not easy. In any event, 2 weeks ago, I gave a talk about basically about beginnings and endings. And I don't know that it ever wound up on the platform. I can't find it. And there were some technical glitches. The only thing I can see is like a less than a 3-minute clip of me just kind of looking a little bit puzzled. And that's obviously not, that wasn't the session. So I don't want to repeat it in the event that it does go back up, but I would like to just say a couple of things about it because there are technical glitches. And so that's kind of what happened, but maybe it'll go up and you can see it, but I'm just going to be very, very quickly repeat what I said, in a nutshell about beginnings and endings. The most important thing to know is that the first 10 minutes or so of a film, as well as the last 10 minutes or so, are very important. Well, all of a film is important, but in the first 10 minutes, it has to draw you in. You have to have a real sense of who that character is and care, because if the main character doesn't interest you and what it is that main character seems to need to be doing over the course of the next 90 minutes to make you want to follow the story, if you haven't got a sense of that and you don't care about it, then particularly since so much of what we watch these days is done at home and you have the option of switching to other things, you're going to move on. So you got to hook people very quickly and make them care about the person and know what it is that person wants, what we call their driving need. And the final 10 minutes are what's going to leave you with a sense of either satisfaction or dissatisfaction. Is the ending earned? Is it something you like? You may not like it, but that doesn't mean it isn't a good ending. It may be earned. It has to be earned. That's kind of the bottom line. And that's the kind of thing that'll have you telling your friends and people, you got to see this film. It's really good. People will forgive a lot of what came before it, the weaker parts of the movie that may not have been as successful for them. But if the ending is good, then and they've kind of enjoyed the movie and the whole thing makes sense, then those 10 minutes are final 10 minutes are gonna be sending people out with good word of mouth. And basically, it's all about how the main character, your protagonist, who I'm gonna refer to with the she pronoun, because I'm a she, is going to be something the character wants from the very beginning, what we call their driving need. They have to have gone through a whole journey with all sorts of obstacles, and by the end have made some kind of a major change and to achieve whatever that obstacle is. Or possibly not achieve maybe the goal, but they have to have changed in the process. So as far as I'm concerned, character is just about the most important thing you're going to be working on if you want to be writing a good screenplay, because the plot follows the character, and you've got to know that character extremely well. That person has to live within you, so that everything that comes out in terms of action, in terms of dialogue, in terms of choices, has to be something that's authentic and within real to that character. And even though the character may be somebody who's fictionalized to you, and probably will be, even if it's compilation, but let's suppose you want to write about somebody who's completely alien to your experience, a coal miner. You still have to have an emotional connection to that character. You have to understand what drives that character. You may not understand everything about it, and you may have to, do research to understand it better. But everybody's a human being, whatever they're doing in life and wherever they are. And you've got to understand who that person is, what their relation is to family, just basically everything about them that you can know. So I'm going to, suggest that you really choose the people you want to write about, or the main character. You want to choose her very, very carefully. You've got to make sure it, in fact, if you're whatever your gender, it doesn't have to be your gender either. It just has to be that you emotionally can respond to that person and make that person real, in order to make that person authentic and everything that happens to that person appear authentic. So I'm going to suggest that before you even think about plot, other than some overall idea you may have, try to really dig deeply into who your character is, so that that person lives inside you before you even hit the computer or paper or whatever, however you write. What do you know about this person? What is this person? Well, you can start with external. What does the person look like? What does that person wear? What's the person's hair color? All sorts of things that kind of, for you, have to be a three-dimensional picture. You want to picture in your mind this person. And even though appearance, I mean, it may be, if a movie gets made, it may be cast somebody who looks totally different from that, but you have to know, what does that person look like? What does that person wear? What's that person's car look like? Or do they drive? How old is that person? Age, gender, intelligence, education. What is the person's relationships like? What kind of family did that person grow up in? All of this is information that may or may not ever belong in your film. However, it will inform every choice that your character makes. How does the person talk? What's the person's vocabulary like? Is that person very expressive? Is the person emotional? Is the person, what is the person's emotional range? Is it very outward? Is it very internal? What kind of love interest does that person have? I know I'm all over the map, but I'm just trying to think of everything, all different things that help to fill in for you who that is. What are the person's friendships like? Love interests? What kind of does the person, what does the person like to eat? Is the person gluten-free? Is the person a meat eater? What is the person's television preferences, movie preferences? The person religious? Do they have any kind of club affiliations? What does the person dream about? And what does the person dream about literally, in terms of when they wake up in the morning, that's what I dreamt? Or what are their larger dreams? Because their larger dreams is something you're going to have to know, and that is going to come out in the film. What does the person's home look like? What does the person's bedroom look like? What is the person's artistic taste? I mean, I'm being repetitive, I realize, but just on and on and on, try to fill out for yourself a really good three-dimensional picture of that person. And what I sometimes like to do that can make it easier when you start to write is, thank God we have find, replace, we can always change it later. But I try to kind of think of somebody who may embody that person that's going to help me when I'm writing, somebody I can picture. And I give the person that name. For example, a long time ago, I had written something and there was a character in it who was a singer, and for whatever reason, I thought of Debbie Reynolds. And so I named the character Debbie, and then later when I was done, I changed the name. But it just kind of helped me flesh out who that character was. So sometimes naming your characters that way at least will help you think about who that person is. So I know I'm kind of driving this point home, but I just couldn't say anything to you more important than to know your character. If you don't know that character, what that character wants, and what that character, the obstacles that are going to face that character in terms of getting what that person wants, and what's going to feel like an achievement or having achieved that goal to that person, then you're not going to be able to write an authentic screenplay. So work on that character. And once you have a really good sense of knowing who that person is, then you're going to start to think about scenes. What's gonna happen to that character? I guess I should maybe say more literally plot. What is gonna happen? Where are we gonna first find that character? What's gonna be happening? And how's that gonna set up what has to happen so that in the first act that we've talked about already, but just to remind you, in the first 10 or 15 minutes, you have to set up that character so that the audience knows who that character is and is interested enough to want to find out if that, and not just knows who it is, but knows what that character wants, so that the audience is going to want to stick with that character to find out if that person's going to get it. And then every scene you're going to be writing, everything that's going to happen, nothing is going to be random. Everything you write is going to have and be in service of the plot and helping that character achieve her need. Nothing, no speech, nothing they say is going to be random, no dialogue, no action, no music choice, no clothing choice, nothing is going to be random. So you're going to have to keep also, with every scene that you write, it's going to constantly be moving the story forward so that you end a scene with wondering what's going to happen next. If you already have a sense that you know, if you're ahead of the character and you know what's going to happen and you know how it's going to end, it's going to lose interest for you. So you have to keep a certain level of suspense and tension going, so that it's, of course, not every scene. I mean, I don't mean like every scene has a function in service of the plot, but there isn't always. The person may meet somebody who's important to that character, and it may not have it may be something that's going to then trigger a relationship or a conflict or something, but there's always, every scene has to have a real sense of purpose as to why it's in that movie and how it's going to drive the story forward, and leave the audience wondering constantly what's going to happen next. So no character that's introduced, no dialogue, no car choice. I mean, I don't know why I keep talking about cars today. But it's like any choice that those characters make. So somebody drives up who's important to them and is either in like a VW Bug or a fancy big SUV, gives you a lot of information. You're going to be getting information all the time. So all the choices you make are going to be giving information. So in any event, everything's pushing that plot forward. So basically, kind of putting a button on what I'm saying, the protagonist, the main character, wants something, goes after it, meets obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, and creating those basically second act 60 or so minutes of film is not that easy. Constantly finding the type of obstacles, the kind of sub characters that belong in the film, what their role is, how they're going to service the plot. There are a lot of choices that have to make. There's always options and choices that get to make, and it can be challenging and also exciting. Because when you start to get things right, and if you talk to other people about it, and you in fact read what you're doing to other people, share what your work with other people, and get feedback that kind of inform. Some of it will resonate, some of it you won't agree with, but that's always very, very useful in terms of getting this done. So that by the end of the film, the person that we start out with is not going to be the person we're meeting at the end. Something will have changed. So that they call it the arc. That person will have gone from A to hopefully well, maybe not Z, but at least T, something like that. So you're going to be choosing the when, the where, the what of all the dramatic action. You're going to keeping the conflict going. Uh, you're going to always know what the character is hoping to achieve with every action that character takes. And at the end of a scene, things are usually going to be in worse shape than at the beginning, so that you constantly keep wondering what's next. And as you add these layers, the conflicts, the layers, and everything, it gives the film depth. Um, and at the end, as I said, the readers have to feel they've gone with you on that journey. Sometimes the audience will be ahead of the character, but and sometimes they'll be wondering, they'll know things that are going to happen and kind of wait for that to happen, and that can create a type of suspense. But that's the kind of choice you make. That's got to be a very deliberate choice when you do that. In any event, I want to leave you with some suggestions, because if you're interested in taking screenwriting seriously and you want to do it, there's a lot of things you can start doing before you start plunging into taking actual courses. One of the things you can do, I'm sorry, is to start watching films as if you were a student. Start observing them. Start thinking about, well, take the film that in your dream of dreams you would have written yourself, and look at that film if you can. Read the screenplay for it if you can, because that's a really interesting exercise to read screenplays, which you can often download online. You can't get all of them, but many of them you can get free screenplays. And it's a very good way of both, you see of course, if you're going to take this seriously, you're going to need to have software for screenwriting. But no matter what, there's a proper format that has to be done. And as you will get that when you go through anything you read, as well as through the proper screen software. Because if you try to do this yourself on Word, it's challenging. It's not that you can't do it, but there is screenware that's taken. Usually, most people expect you to be using the proper screen software. And but when you look at a screenplay, you see how things are formatted. You see how the interior, exterior, how each scene is set up, which is called the slug line. You see how the action is written, which is nothing like novel writing. It's not like narrative writing. It has to be both. It has to tell us what's going to happen, but it has to be done in a way, particularly for the reader, which is not what the viewer is, but the reader is the person who's going to be interested in your screenplay. So you have to make it can't be totally flat. You want to make it interesting, but it can't be too descriptive. I mean, if you're going to write like about, let's say, a town that's got a lot of different, let's say a small town in America, that's all you may need to say. Small town USA. You're not going to be exactly reading out everything, and there's this book is next to this store, and the store has got a porch leading up to it. You're just not going to be doing things like that. You're going to be doing a much more overview and as concise and as encapsulated as you can to set up that scene. And then you're going to have the dialogue, and movie dialogue is very different from real life dialogue, because as I said, it has to be real movie dialogue. It's so interesting. It's not, when you're watching a movie, you can always tell if people don't sound real. Bringing characters to life requires dialogue that feels very real, and yet it's always chosen in service of that's the needs of that scene. You may be coming into the middle of a scene, and somebody may be saying, "Mother, if you touch that thing again, I'm going to smack you." Well, hopefully you're not going to say that to your mother, and you're not going to smack somebody. So that just kind of came into my head. But something like that, you're going to know, all of a sudden you're going to know, oh, what's going on in this scene? There's tension going on here. So you're going to be very, very careful about the type of dialogue. And as you watch watch films, and start really listening as if you're a student, you're going to be starting to track what sounds like what film has real dialogue. If there's a film that you really like, figure out what do you like about it so much? What is working? What has made the what how has the writer drawn you in? Again, I would suggest you also read the script if you're able to, as to how it's described. But think about what makes that character interesting enough to you to want to either spend the money or spend the time on finding out what that character's story is. So study films, and you can think about how the main character. Think about the first 10 minutes that I talked about, and the last 10 minutes. Is the ending earned? In the beginning, do you know what enough about the character to know what that character's driving need is, and is it something that's compelling to you? And then, as you track the film, is it something that is continues to build until the end, or is it disappointing? Just keep studying. Um, where did the film lag? What doesn't work? You can also another thing you can do, of course, is to read books about screenwriting, and they're of course helpful in many many ways. But like everything else in life, when you sit down to do it, it doesn't just flow from reading a book. I think one of the things you can taking class is helpful, and particularly if it's a kind of a class where it's not just lecture. I remember maybe 25, 30 years ago, I took a course that's still being taught called Story Structure by uh, Bob McAfee, I think his name is. I'm sure I'm just trying to think if it's Robert or Bob, but he's Bob. And he gives courses all the time. He teaches it through watching Casablanca. You going through it in enormous detail. It's a very good course. But from the leap from taking that course, it's like a 2-3 day workshop, and he does them all over the country. So it also is a good way to kind of wet your feet in terms of getting into this. But I would also suggest, if you really are interested, to take and in doing it seriously, you can either become a film student, take actually college courses or master's courses, or you can take other courses like Sarah Lawrence has. One of the things I'm teaching in July is a 15-minute course on writing a short film, because the ingredients that are required in doing a short are pretty much the same. You've got to have a character, something's got to happen over the course of that 15 minutes or so that's going to tell you a full story. And so sometimes that can be helpful, but I also am a strong believer in courses that are interactive, where you get to read your work and hear other people's work and give each other feedback. And when you're listening to the feedback for other people, you can always apply it to what you're doing too. It's a very good way of sharing your work. Or if let's say you are at home and you write a scene, you have an idea for a story, and well, right now we're in the world of COVID. So let's say you do a Zoom meeting and you ask some friends, and you give them a little script and say, "What do you think of this scene?" It can be a 3-minute scene. You write a little scene and say, "What do you think? What are you learning? What are you learning about these characters? What do you think these characters want? Who's the main character?" Write a little scene and ask your friends to act it out, and then get feedback. There's so many fun ways to kind of wet your wet your whistle or whatever. Get yourself started in terms of doing this. Another thing you want to do is keep your ears open, your eyes and your ears open. All of life is material. I don't mean by that uh, we write, it has to be our own stories. You read the newspaper, you see a story, and you find it very compelling. You hear of a story, or just listening to how people talk. Just another thing you can do that's really a useful exercise is to maybe, if you hear another, let's say you hear uh, an argument going on in another room, or a conversation that's just lively and interesting, and either record it, write it down, not like to be an eavesdropper, but to think about, if it's something that really perks your interest, ask yourself, what is it? Just study it, not, and this is within a family setting or with people I'm not by any means suggesting you create trouble with people but just for your own value. How did What was it about those words that were said that was so kind of juicy that it drew you into it? What perked your interest? How was it articulated? Just, I mean, all of life is a study. And so in any event, I'm going to leave you with that. Wish you good luck with it if you want to go forward. I think people always say, "Oh, it sounds so exciting what you're doing." What we're doing is work. It's very hard work. You've finally come up with a draft of sorts that takes your main character from A to Z, and then that's just the beginning. Then you start sharing it, getting feedback, back to the drawing board, constantly revising because it's like layers. I just don't think maybe very, very experienced screenwriters who are very prolific can do it. And I mean, television writers, I mean, when they have to do episodes week after week, well, they already have their characters created. And so basically it's a matter of what situation are they going to put their characters in order to write that scene. So they've done a lot of the work already. But you're not going to get it right in the beginning. It's going to take time. It's going to take work. But if this is right for you, you're going to have a good time doing it. And I wish you the best in that endeavor. And if you choose to take it, Sarah Lawrence has the Writing Institute has all different courses. So hopefully maybe that could be like a step along the journey for you as well. Okay, bye.